It began with a dead man drifting in the sea. No name, no past, no future. And yet, that man would change the course of World War II. This is the story of how a single corpse, carrying a handful of forged papers, fooled an empire, saved thousands of lives, and became one of the greatest deceptions in modern history. A story so improbable it sounds like fiction. But it wasn't. In the spring of 1943, the war in Europe was finally balanced. Germany occupied almost all of the continent. The Allies had fought their way through North Africa, and now they were looking toward Europe's soft underbelly, the Mediterranean. To push into mainland Europe, they needed to invade from the south. But where? The logical target was Sicily, the island at the heart of the Mediterranean. Every general knew it. Every strategist could see it on the map. And so did Adolf Hitler. If the Allies attacked Sicily, they would be met with fierce resistance. German divisions, tanks, artillery, all waiting. A direct invasion could end in catastrophe. The Allies needed a way to make Hitler believe the attack was coming somewhere else. And that's where deception came in. In London, within the shadowy corridors of British intelligence, a small group of officers was tasked with one mission: to mislead the Germans. Among them were two men, Ewan Montagu, a barrister-turned-intelligence officer, and Charles Cholmondeley, an eccentric RAF pilot with a wild imagination. Together, they came across a memo, an obscure idea buried deep in a naval file. It suggested that a body could be used to plant false papers near enemy territory. At first, it sounded absurd. A dead man as a secret agent. But in war, the absurd can become brilliant. Montagu and Cholmondeley began shaping the plan. They would find a suitable body, give him a false identity, plant secret documents on him suggesting the Allies were planning to invade Greece and Sardinia, then release the body near Spain, a country neutral in name but friendly to Nazi Germany. The Spanish authorities would discover the body, hand it to the Germans, and the deception would begin. It was bold, it was macabre, and it would be called Operation Mincemeat. The first challenge was the hardest, finding the body. It had to be believable, a man who could have died at sea with no obvious injuries. Someone anonymous, whose death wouldn't be noticed. Eventually they found him, a homeless man named Glyndwr Michael, who had died after ingesting rat poison. His death, tragic and forgotten, would now serve a secret purpose. British intelligence dressed his body in the uniform of a Royal Marine officer. They gave him a name, Major William Martin. To the world, he would appear real. To the Germans, he would be a clue worth following. But a uniform and a name were not enough. He needed a life. Every spy knows that the smallest detail can make or break a cover story, so Montagu's team built Major Martin's life piece by piece. They filled his pockets with personal effects, a photograph of his fiancée Pam, 2 love letters written by a typist in the office, a ticket stub, a receipt for a new shirt, a note from his bank about an overdraft. Each item told a story, that of a young, well-connected British officer living in London, deeply in love, occasionally careless with his finances, but entirely human. And then came the heart of the plan, the documents. A series of letters were placed in his briefcase, each written in the language of high command. They hinted casually but clearly that the Allies' next move would target Greece and Sardinia, not Sicily. One letter even mentioned that poor old Sicily would only be subjected to a diversionary feint. It was a perfect piece of theatre, believable, conversational, and just careless enough to feel authentic. The dead man was ready to go to war. On a cold April morning in 1943, the submarine HMS Seraph left the Scottish coast carrying a strange passenger. The body of Major William Martin, packed carefully in a steel canister filled with dry ice. The crew was told little, only that they were transporting something special. For days, the submarine slipped silently through the waters of the Atlantic, bound for the coast of Spain. At dawn on April 30th, they reached their destination, the waters off Huelva, a coastal town known for its German sympathizers. The crew surfaced. The sea was calm, a few seagulls circled above. As the canister was opened, cold mist poured out. The body was carried to the deck, dressed neatly, the briefcase chained to his wrist. With a short prayer, the crew released him into the waves. He drifted away, face downward, carried by the tide towards Spain. It was 4:30 in the morning. Operation Mincemeat had begun. Later that same morning, a fisherman spotted something floating in the water. He rowed closer and found the lifeless figure of a British officer, the briefcase still attached. He alerted the local authorities, who in turn contacted the Spanish Navy. By noon, the body was in official custody. British diplomats soon arrived, demanding the return of their officer's remains and the sensitive documents he carried. It was all part of the act. The more they insisted, the more valuable those papers seemed. Spain, officially neutral, claimed to respect British wishes. But behind the scenes, copies of the documents were quickly passed to German intelligence agents in Madrid. Within days, microfilms of every page were on their way to Berlin. In Germany, the documents landed on the desk of the Abwehr, the German military intelligence service. They examined every detail, the tone of the letters, the signatures, the creases in the paper, even the water stains. It all seemed genuine. The information was sent straight to Hitler's headquarters. When the Führer read it, he was convinced. To him it confirmed what he already feared, that the Allies planned to attack Greece, not Sicily. He ordered reinforcements to be sent east. Divisions were moved from France and the Balkans. Sicily, meanwhile, was left with minimal defences. Operation Mincemeat had worked. The corpse had fooled the Führer. On July 9, 1943, the real Allied invasion began. Across the Mediterranean, hundreds of ships advanced towards Sicily. Soldiers watched the coastline light up with artillery fire. But the resistance they met was far lighter than expected. The German High Command had been caught off guard, their troops scattered in the wrong places. Within weeks, the Allies controlled the island. Sicily became the stepping stone that opened the way to Italy. And eventually, the fall of Mussolini's regime. All because of one man who was never alive to see it. After the war, the details of Operation Mincemeat remained classified for years. Only a handful of people knew the truth about Major William Martin, the man who never was. He was buried in Spain with full military honours. His gravestone still bears the name that fooled the Nazis. Decades later, when the operation was declassified, historians discovered his true identity, Glyndwr Michael, a Welsh labourer who had died alone in London. He had no family, no fortune, no fame. Yet his death and the story built around it became one of the most effective acts of deception in human history. Operation Mincemeat changed the way wars were fought. It showed that intelligence could be as powerful as any army, that ideas could win battles where bullets could not. But it also raised uncomfortable questions about the morality of using a human body as a tool of war, about the thin line between ingenuity and exploitation. Ewan Montague, years later, would say that he never forgot the man behind the operation, the silent partner who never chose to serve, but who did so nonetheless. The officers who created the ruse were decorated for their service. The man who made it possible remained nameless for decades. In the end, Operation Mincemeat wasn't just about tricking the enemy. It was about the strange intersection of humanity and war. How compassion, deception, and sacrifice can intertwine in ways that defy simple judgment. It reminds us that even in a conflict fought with tanks and bombers, the fate of nations can turn on something as fragile as belief, and as haunting as a single body adrift in the sea. The Germans believed what they saw because it felt true. And perhaps that's the most unsettling lesson of all, that truth itself can be manufactured if told convincingly enough. Today, in the small cemetery of Huelva, Spain, lies the grave of Major William Martin, Royal Marines. Visitors still leave flowers by the headstone. Some know his secret, most don't. But perhaps that's fitting, because the power of Operation Mincemeat lies not just in the lie it told, but in the reminder that sometimes the smallest, quietest stories can decide the outcome of the greatest struggles. It began with a dead man drifting in the sea, and it ended with the world forever changed.